Hello everyone, in this video we're going to be talking about JavaScript arithmetic operators. So as you can see here, there are 7 different types. Most of these you would be familiar with, you would have seen in maths, but I'm going to be going through them all anyway because there's some of them that's slightly different while programming. So, and then there's also another couple of additional ones that you probably wouldn't have seen before. So starting off with addition, this is simply just adding two variables together. So if we're using numbers, we can add two numbers together. If we're adding two strings, we can also add two strings together. Then we move on to subtraction. It's exactly what you would have used in maths before. It's just taking two numbers away from each other. Then multiplication is the same thing that you would have seen in maths as well. The only thing to keep in mind with this is rather than using like an x to multiply like two numbers, like 5 multiplied by 5, we wouldn't actually be able to do this. We'd have to do something like 5 and then this little star, or we can call it an asterisk, 5. So this here would be our solution to multiply two numbers. Then if we move on to division, we can see it's a little bit different as well. So usually we might have something like 10, and then we would have a divide sign which would look like this, and then by 5, and we would get our answer. While if we wanted to do a division within JavaScript, we'd have to do something like this. It would be 10, and then it would be this thing that's called a forward slash, which is this, and the forward slash will allow us to divide. And this line here is the exact same as this line here, only in this line here you would use it in maths, while in JavaScript we use this. So moving on to the modulo operator or modulus. This is the same thing that we would have seen in remainder in maths. So for example, if you have like a number, if you have, let's say 15, and you want to get the remainder of, 5 into 15, you can do 15 and then you can do modular 5, and this answer will be 0 because 5 goes into 15 evenly, so there's no remainder left over. But if we had something like 14 modulus 5, 5 would go into 10 twice, but we don't have enough to go into 15, we're missing one, so we would actually have a remainder of 4 in this example here for 14. Again, 15, it would be 0 because it goes in evenly. If we done something like 20 modulo 5, we would get the exact same answer for 20 modulo 5 as 15 modulo 5. These would both equal 0. These next two operators might look quite difficult or quite different, but they're actually pretty simple. So for our increment, if we have a number and we want to increment just by 1, we can use this operator. So for example, if we have 5 and we done like 5 plus plus, we would then get 6. So this would be equivalent to 6. And then similar with the decrement operator, if we had 5 and we done minus minus, we would get 4. So it just takes 1 from it. So now we're going to jump into some JavaScript and we're going to actually start programming using these operators that we've learned. So in our last video we had just installed our IED, Visual Studio Code, and we had ran a basic application, a Hello World application. So what we can do now is we can close down out of this. You can save it if you want. I'm going to save it, and we're going to need to create a brand new file. So you can call this file whatever you want. It doesn't actually matter what you name it. I'm going to call mine Arithmetic Operators.js. Remember to add in the .js because the .js is our file extension. If we don't add this in, our computer won't know what to do with the code that we type inside of it. So if we go and just hit enter, and then we can open up our file. So what we want to do now is we want to use these operators that we've learned. So like always, we're going to console log it to the screen so we can actually see what the computer is doing. So if we do console.log, and we do 2 brackets, and we just put in a number just to make sure that we've created our file correctly and that everything's working. So we're going to go to run, and we're going to go to run without debugging, and we can see 5 is displayed. So this is working. So if we want to use the addition operator that we've learned about, we can just do plus, and then we can do whatever number you want. I'm going to pick 7, so in this case 5 plus 7 should equal 12. So we're going to run this and make sure that it works for us. So we'll go up to run again, and then we'll go run without debugging, and we can see we've got 12. Brilliant. So now we're going to try adding two strings together. So just keep in mind this plus operator or addition operator can be used for both numbers and strings. So maybe we have two strings. Maybe we have, let's say, Ryan, and then again we're going to put in our plus, and we're going to put in a second string, and we're just going to put in Hill. Okay, and we're going to run this and see what our output will be. And we can see Ryan Hill is displayed. We can also notice that Ryan Hill is kind of pushed together and squished. To get around this, for this example, we're just going to put a space in between Ryan and Hill. So if we go and run this again, we can see that there's now a space between Ryan and Hill. That's the addition operator. Next, we're going to move on to the subtraction operator. So if we go back to using numbers, we can pick whatever number we want. Let's say maybe 10, and then we'll do minus, and we'll do 3. So in this case, we would expect to see the output 7. So if we run this, we can see that 7. Now, one thing to keep in mind is, what if we use a negative number? Like, can we see negative numbers in JavaScript, or how does that work? So to test this out, we can do 10 minus 13. So 10 minus 13 will leave us with minus 3. So if we go and run this, we can see that JavaScript is able to deal with negative numbers. So that's just something to keep in mind. We're now going to move on to multiplication. So we'll clear this again, and with simple multiplication, remember we can't do like 5x5 because we're going to get a red squiggly line underneath the x and underneath the 5. This is because JavaScript doesn't know what's going on. It doesn't know what this x is doing. It thinks maybe x is to be printed out as a string, and then it has a 5 before it, so it doesn't know what's going on. So we need to say we want to multiply 5 by 5. So we use this asterisk or star sign, and then we put in 5. And now we should see that 5 multiplied by 5 is 25. So we'll run this to make sure we're right. And we can see 25 is being displayed. Now we're going to move on to division. So we're going to pick another two numbers. We'll pick 10. So 10, and then remember, again, there's no division sign on our computer or on our keyboard. So we're going to have to use this /. Now this / will, depending on your keyboard, it's usually located near the bottom right of your keyboard. You'll see a question mark, and you might see a shift key. So beside that question mark, there's also a /. So if you go and press that question mark key, you'll see a /. Now, we want to divide by the number 5. So we're going to see our output now. We're going to run our program. So run, and we can see our output is 2 because 2 divides into 10 twice. Now, if we had a number like maybe 5.2, what would happen here? Because 5.2 doesn't actually divide into 10 evenly, at least. So if we go and run this, we can see that we get 1.9230 and a bunch of other numbers. So we can see that by using our JavaScript programs, we can create numbers, we can create whole numbers that we've seen before, and we can create strings, but we can also create decimal numbers, or some people call them floating point numbers. So if you hear the term float or decimal, you just know that it has a decimal place, and it could have maybe 2 numbers after it. It could be 2 decimal places, or this one here has many more. After division, we're going to talk about the modulo operator. So the modulo operator is the % sign on our keyboard. So if we want to locate that, it's usually at the number 5, but to access the % sign, we need to locate the shift key on our keyboard, and we need to hold down shift and then press 5, and we'll see something like this. Okay, so we're going to just get rid of this, and we're going to pick two numbers again. We're going to pick maybe 15, and then we're going to pick modulo and then 5, and we're going to run this and see what our output is. So if we go up here and we hit run, and then we go run without debugging, we can see 0, and the reason that we get 0 is because 5 divides into 15 perfectly. There's no remainder. So it doesn't matter like how many times the number on the right divides into the number on the left. So it doesn't matter how many times 5 divides into 15. It's, you know, if it divides in evenly, the answer is always going to be 0, because again, remember, it's the remainder that we're looking at. So if I was to change this to something like, you know, 20, it would still be the same thing, because 5 goes into 15 3 times and there's nothing left over, and 5 goes into 20 4 times and there's nothing left over. So if we go and run this, we'll see that our answer is still 0, and we could put whatever we want. We could put even 200 in here and we're still going to get the same output. But if we done something like, let's say one of the numbers we used before was 15, and we got our output as 0. But if we used 14, so we just took one away from it, notice here that 5 will not divide into 14. You know, 5 will divide into 14, but there'll be a remainder. So 5 can divide into 5, 5 can divide into 10, and then between 10 and 15 is where our number 14 is located. So 5 will divide into 10 twice, that's fine, but there'll be 4 left over. There's a remainder of 4. So if we go and run this, we'll see that our output will be 4. I hope that's clear. Now the next thing that we're going to move on to is going to be our increment and decrement operators. So this is quite simple. We're going to define a variable for this. So we're going to just call it, we'll call it num. So we'll say let num, and then we'll set it to 5. Okay. And then what we're going to do is we're going to get our num, and we're going to use the increment operator. So we're going to just do 2 plus signs, and then we're going to console log our number to see what our result is. So if we go and run this, we should see 5 plus 1, which would be 6, and we see 6. If we didn't have this line, so imagine we took this away and we went to run it, we'd see 5, because all that we've got here is we've defined a num and we've set its value to 5 and we're printing it out. And then if we had num and we used the increment operator, we're just adding 1 to that. Like, we could also have a second one, so we could have another num plus plus. So what would happen here is, you could imagine we start off with the number 5, then we get to this line and we want to add 1 to the number, so we have it equal 6. Then we get to this other line, we want to add another 1 to it, then we would have it to equal 7, and then we print it out. So let's run this and see, do we get 7? So we can see we get 7. Now, quite similar with the decrement operator, instead of using pluses, we just use 2 minus signs, okay? So now what are we doing? We're defining 5, again, the same with our increment operator. Then we're moving down to this line and we're taking 1 from it. So 5 minus 1, remember, every time we're using these, it's only taking away 1. So we're taking away 1, so our number will be 4. So if we run this just to make sure, yeah, we can see that our output is 4.